The small suburban town of Maplewood was known for its quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and a high school where everyone seemed to know each other's business. It was the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happened, until Maya Johnson arrived. At just 14 years old, Maya stood out in ways that no one could ignore. With her bright smile, confident stride, and colorful braids styled into intricate patterns, she looked like she had stepped straight out of a magazine. Her fashion sense alone, a mix of bold colors and unique accessories, was enough to turn heads as she walked through the doors of Lincoln High School on her very first day. Maya wasn't new to starting over. Having moved around several times, due to her adoptive father's work commitments, she had learned how to adapt quickly, but this time felt different. There was something about Maplewood that made her feel both excited and uneasy. As she navigated the crowded hallways with her schedule clutched tightly in her hand, whispers followed her everywhere. Some students were curious, others skeptical, but all of them noticed her presence. What none of them knew, however, was that Maya came from a family far more extraordinary than anyone could imagine. Her adoptive father, none other than Vin Diesel, the Hollywood superstar famous not only for his action-packed movies but also for his deep voice and larger-than-life personality. But Maya didn't want to be treated differently because of her dad. For years, her parents had gone to great lengths to ensure she lived as normal a life as possible. They encouraged her to focus on her studies, friendships, and passions without letting fame overshadow who she truly was. So when people asked questions about her last name or why she talked so confidently, she simply shrugged it off and smiled. "I'm just me," she would say, hoping they'd leave it at that. Unfortunately, not everyone was interested in getting to know the real Maya. Enter Jake Carter, the self-proclaimed king of Lincoln High. Known for his loud laugh, towering height, and knack for making others squirm, Jake ruled the school with an iron fist, or rather a sharp tongue. He thrived on finding targets, especially those who seemed vulnerable or different. And on this particular Monday morning, Maya became his newest mark. It started during homeroom when Jake leaned across the aisle smirking as he studied her outfit. "Nice braids," he said loud enough for nearby classmates to hear. "Are you auditioning for some kind of movie?" A few kids chuckled nervously, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Maya froze for a split second before turning to face him. Her eyes locked onto his, steady and unflinching. "Thanks," she replied coolly. "At least I don't need insults to make myself look tough." Her response caught Jake off guard, but only for a moment. Determined not to lose control of the situation, he leaned back in his chair, pretending to yawn. "Whatever," he muttered dismissively. But deep down, he was intrigued and slightly annoyed. No one had ever stood up to him like that before. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of what would become one of the most unforgettable chapters in Lincoln High's history. As the bell rang and students filed out of the classroom, Maya took a deep breath, trying to shake off the encounter. She told herself not to let Jake get under her skin. After all, she had dealt with bullies before. But there was something about this guy that felt different, like he wouldn't stop until he got exactly what he wanted. What Maya didn't realize yet was that Jake's actions were about to set off a chain reaction that would change both their lives forever. The tension between Maya and Jake simmered throughout the day, bubbling just beneath the surface as they crossed paths in the crowded hallways of Lincoln High. By lunchtime, the entire school seemed to sense that something was brewing. Maya sat at a table near the corner of the cafeteria, quietly eating her sandwich while trying to ignore the occasional stares and whispers from other students. She had always been good at blending into new environments, but today felt different. Jake's mocking comment during homeroom lingered in her mind, gnawing at her confidence little by little. It wasn't long before Jake appeared, flanked by his usual group of followers who laughed at every word he said. He sauntered over to Maya's table with an air of arrogance, clearly enjoying the attention he was getting from onlookers. Placing one hand on the back of an empty chair, he leaned forward slightly, his smirk widening as he looked down at her. "So, how's your first day going?" he asked sarcastically, his tone dripping with mockery. "Still planning to make it big in Hollywood?" Maya didn't respond right away. Instead, she took another bite of her sandwich, chewing slowly, as if she hadn't heard him. Her calm demeanor only fueled Jake's frustration. He hated being ignored. Leaning closer, he added, "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you're too busy dreaming about being famous like whoever your dad is." That jab hit harder than Maya cared to admit. For a brief moment, she considered walking away and avoiding further confrontation. But deep down, she knew that giving in would only encourage him. Putting down her sandwich, she met his gaze head-on, her expression unwavering. "You know what, Jake?" she said evenly, her voice carrying just enough authority to silence the murmurs around them. "If making fun of someone because they're different makes you feel better about yourself, then go ahead. But don't expect me to play along." Her words caught Jake off guard, not because they were particularly sharp or cutting, but because they came from a place of quiet strength. Most kids either cowered under his insults or lashed out angrily, but Maya's response was neither. It was measured, almost mature, and it left him struggling to think of a comeback. After a few awkward seconds, he forced a laugh, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Wow, okay," he sneered, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Guess we've got ourselves a tough girl here." As Jake turned to leave, pretending the encounter hadn't rattled him, Maya exhaled deeply, feeling a mix of relief and lingering unease. She hated confrontations. They reminded her of moments in the past when she'd been singled out for being different. Still, she couldn't deny a small sense of pride in standing her ground. Across the cafeteria, a few students exchanged glances, some nodding approvingly while others whispered among themselves. Word spread quickly. Maya Johnson wasn't someone to mess with. Later that afternoon, during gym class, Jake decided to push things further. While Maya was tying her shoelaces near the bleachers, he deliberately bumped into her, causing her water bottle to spill onto the floor. "Oops," he said loudly, grinning as his friends erupted into laughter. The sound echoed through the gym, drawing stares from nearby classmates. Maya clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay composed despite the rising anger inside her. Picking up her belongings, she stood up straight and faced him once more. "Are you done yet?" she asked sharply, her patience wearing thin. "Because honestly, this whole bully act is getting old." Jake faltered again, momentarily thrown off balance by her directness. He opened his mouth to retort, but stopped when he noticed several teachers approaching, alerted by the commotion. Realizing he'd pushed his luck too far this time, he muttered something under his breath and walked away, leaving Maya standing alone amid curious glances. By the end of the school day, Maya felt drained but determined. She knew Jake wouldn't stop easily. People like him thrived on resistance. Yet there was something empowering about refusing to let his words define her. As she packed up her books and headed toward the bus stop, she replayed the events of the day in her mind, wondering how much longer she could keep pretending everything was fine. One thing was certain. Jake Carter had no idea who he was dealing with, or the storm he was unknowingly stepping into. That evening, Maya sat cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through her phone as she tried to distract herself from the day's events. The weight of Jake's words still lingered in her mind, though she did her best to push them aside. Her room was a cozy sanctuary, a mix of posters from her favorite movies, stacks of books she hadn't yet finished reading, and photos of her family scattered across the walls. One picture stood out among the rest, a candid shot of her laughing, alongside Vin Diesel at a beach during one of their vacations. It was a reminder of the life she came from, but also of the balance she had to maintain between being Maya and Vin Diesel's daughter. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a video call request from her best friend back in California, Tessa. They had been inseparable since elementary school, and even though distance now separated them, they made it a point to stay connected. Smiling faintly, Maya accepted the call. "Hey, superstar," Tessa greeted cheerfully, her face lighting up the screen. "How's the new school? Made any friends yet?" Maya hesitated for a moment before responding. She didn't want to worry Tessa or make her feel guilty about moving away, so she forced a small smile. "It's okay," she said, choosing her words carefully. The classes are fine and some people seem nice enough. But, Tessa interrupted, raising an eyebrow knowingly. Come on, Maya. I've known you forever. Something's bothering you. Sighing, Maya gave in. She told Tessa everything, the stares, the whispers, and most importantly, Jake's relentless bullying. As she recounted the cafeteria incident and the gym class confrontation, Tessa listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to anger. That guy sounds like such a jerk, Tessa exclaimed, shaking her head. You should totally tell your dad about him. Imagine if Vin Diesel showed up at his house or something. Maya chuckled softly at the thought, picturing Jake's reaction to seeing Vin standing on his doorstep. But almost immediately, her amusement faded. I can't do that, she said firmly. Dad's already done so much to help me fit in. If I tell him, he'll probably fly out here and turn this into a huge deal. And honestly, I don't want special treatment because of who he is. Tessa frowned, clearly conflicted. I get it, but you shouldn't have to deal with this alone, either. Maybe there's another way to handle it without involving your dad. They spent the next hour brainstorming ideas, discussing everything from ignoring Jake completely to reporting him to the school administration. By the end of the conversation, Maya felt slightly better, not because she had a perfect solution, but because talking to Tessa reminded her that she wasn't truly alone. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jake wouldn't stop unless she took matters into her own hands. Later that night, after saying goodbye to Tessa, Maya decided to check in with her parents. She dialed their number, knowing they'd be finishing dinner around this time. Vin answered on the second ring, his deep voice instantly calming her nerves. Hey, kiddo, how's my favorite girl doing? He asked warmly, his tone full of affection. I'm good, Dad, Maya replied, forcing another smile even though he couldn't see her. Just checking in to say hi. Vin paused for a moment, sensing something in her voice. You sure? You sound a little off. Everything okay at school? Maya hesitated, tempted to confide in him about Jake, but instead she shrugged it off. Yeah, just adjusting to the new routine, you know? Nothing major. Vin didn't press further, at least not right away. Well, if anything comes up, you know you can always talk to me or Mom, right? We're only a call away. I know, Dad. Thanks, Maya said softly, touched by his concern. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, they ended the call, leaving Maya sitting quietly in her room once again. As she stared at her phone, she replayed their conversation in her mind. Her dad's words echoed in her thoughts. If anything comes up, you can always talk to us. Part of her wanted to take him up on that offer, to let him swoop in and fix everything like he always did. But another part of her knew that this was her battle to fight. She had spent years proving to herself and others that she could stand on her own 2 feet, regardless of her famous last name. Still, as she drifted off to sleep that night, Maya couldn't help but wonder how long she could keep pretending everything was fine. Deep down, she knew that Jake's bullying wasn't just about her. It was about power, control, and fear. And while she wasn't ready to involve her dad just yet, she resolved to find a way to confront Jake directly. If nothing else, she owed it to herself to prove that she was stronger than anyone's cruel words, including his. The next morning, Maya woke up with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in days. She had spent most of the night tossing and turning, replaying Jake's taunts over and over in her mind. But instead of letting his words drag her down, she decided to channel that frustration into something productive. This wasn't just about standing up for herself anymore. It was about proving to Jake and maybe even to herself that no one could knock her off balance. As she got ready for school, Maya chose her outfit carefully. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about feeling confident. She picked out a pair of jeans she loved, a bright yellow hoodie that always made her smile, and her favorite sneakers, the ones she'd worn during some of her toughest moments. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, she reminded herself why she was doing this, not because she needed Jake's approval or validation, but because she deserved respect. When she arrived at Lincoln High, the hallways buzzed with their usual energy. Students chatted loudly, lockers slammed shut, and teachers tried to corral everyone toward class. Maya kept her head high as she navigated the chaos, ignoring the occasional whispers and sideways glances. She knew people were still talking about yesterday's incidents, but she refused to let it bother her. For once, she felt like she was taking control of the narrative. Jake wasted no time picking up where he'd left off. During second period, he cornered her near her locker, flanked by his usual group of followers. "Morning, Hollywood," he sneered, leaning against the neighboring locker with an exaggerated grin. "Did you cry yourself to sleep last night?" Maya froze for half a second before slamming her locker shut with more force than necessary. Turning to face him, she crossed her arms over her chest and raised an eyebrow. "Wow, Jake, is this really how you spend your mornings? Chasing after me like I'm some kind of hobby?" His smirk faltered slightly, caught off guard by her boldness. "What's your problem?" he shot back, though his tone lacked its usual sharpness. "I'm just having a little fun." "Fun?" Maya repeated, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "You think making fun of someone is fun? Newsflash, it's not. It's pathetic." A few students nearby stopped what they were doing to watch the exchange unfold. Some looked uncomfortable, while others seemed intrigued. Jake glanced around, clearly aware that all eyes were on him now. He shifted uneasily, but quickly masked it with another attempt at bravado. "Oh, come on. Don't act like you're so perfect. Everyone knows you're just here because of your famous dad." For a split second, Maya felt her heart skip a beat. She hadn't expected him to go there, not yet anyway. But instead of backing down, she leaned in closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You don't know anything about me or my family," she said firmly, her tone laced with quiet authority. "And honestly, I feel sorry for you." That threw Jake completely off guard. "Sorry for me?" he echoed, his voice rising slightly. "Why would you feel sorry for me?" "Because," Maya continued, speaking loud enough now for the growing crowd to hear, "if you need to tear other people down just to feel better about yourself, then you must be pretty miserable. And trust me, no amount of bullying is going to change that." The hallway fell silent. Even Jake's friends exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of how to react. For the first time, Jake seemed genuinely rattled. His cheeks flushed red, and he took a step back, muttering something under his breath before storming off down the hall. As the tension eased, a few students approached Maya tentatively, offering words of support. One girl even gave her a small thumbs up, mouthing, "That was awesome." Maya managed a grateful smile, though inside she felt drained. Standing up to Jake had been empowering, but it had also taken every ounce of courage she had. Later that day during lunch, Maya found herself replaying the confrontation in her mind. She couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing Jake squirm, but she also knew this wasn't over. People like him didn't give up easily, especially when their pride was on the line. Still, for the first time since starting at Lincoln High, Maya felt like she was finally gaining the upper hand. By refusing to play his game, she had turned the tables and shown everyone watching that kindness and confidence could be far more powerful than cruelty and fear. But as she sat alone at her table, nibbling on her sandwich, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's next move might be bigger and meaner than anything she'd faced so far. Jake stormed out of the hallway that morning, his face burning with a mix of embarrassment and anger. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Maya Johnson, the new girl he'd been trying to intimidate for days, had turned the tables on him in front of half the school. Worse still, she'd done it without raising her voice or throwing a punch. Her words had cut deeper than any insult he could have thrown back, leaving him feeling exposed and powerless. For someone who prided himself on being untouchable, this was an unfamiliar and infuriating feeling. By the time he reached his next class, Jake's mind was racing. He needed to regain control, to remind everyone, and himself, that he was still the one calling the shots. That afternoon, as students filed into the computer lab for their technology elective, Jake hatched a plan. Sitting at his workstation, he pulled up his phone under the desk, opened his social media account, and began typing a post. "Guess who thinks they're better than everyone else?" he wrote, tagging Maya's account despite not actually following her. "Hollywood wannabe Maya J needs to learn that fame doesn't make you cool. Stick to your movies, princess. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin. Almost instantly, notifications started pouring in. Likes, comments, shares. Some of his followers chimed in with supportive jabs, while others simply enjoyed the drama. But what Jake didn't anticipate was how quickly things would spiral out of his favor. Within minutes, curious classmates clicked on Maya's profile to see what all the fuss was about. At first, they found little more than a private account, with a handful of carefully curated posts, pictures of her hanging out with friends, snippets from family vacations, and selfies showcasing her ever-changing hairstyles. Nothing too revealing. But then someone noticed something unusual. Tucked away among the photos were candid shots of Maya posing with celebrities. And not just any celebrities, A-listers like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Michelle Rodriguez, and even Vin Diesel himself. Word spread like wildfire. By the end of the period, whispers filled the hallways. "Is that real?" one student asked, showing their friend a screenshot of Maya standing next to Vin Diesel at what looked like a movie premiere. Another chimed in. "Wait, so her dad is the Vin Diesel? Like Fast and Furious Vin Diesel?" By the time Maya walked into her final class of the day, she could feel the shift in the atmosphere immediately. People stared openly, some whispering, behind cupped hands, while others gave her hesitant smiles. A boy in the back row leaned over to his buddy and said loudly enough for her to hear, "So, are we getting free movie tickets now?" Maya sighed inwardly, torn between frustration and resignation. She had hoped to keep her famous connection private, at least until she settled in, but Jake's careless post had blown her cover wide open. As she took her seat, she caught sight of a notification on her phone. Dozens of new friend requests and messages flooding her inbox. The attention was overwhelming, and she couldn't help but wonder if anything about her life here would ever feel normal again. Meanwhile, Jake sat at his own desk scrolling through his phone nervously. His initial satisfaction was fading fast as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Sure, his post had drawn plenty of attention, but not the kind he'd expected. Instead of rallying support against Maya, people were starting to question him. Comments under his original post ranged from defensive, "Why are you picking on her?" to outright mocking, "Dude, do you have any idea who her dad is?" Even some of his closest friends seemed uneasy, distancing themselves as the backlash grew. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Jake lingered by his locker, staring blankly at the graffiti-covered metal. He hadn't meant for things to escalate this way. All he'd wanted was to put Maya in her place, to prove that she wasn't as untouchable as she seemed. But now he was the one feeling cornered, unsure of how to undo the damage he'd caused. Across campus, Maya stepped onto the bus, clutching her backpack tightly. Despite the whirlwind of attention surrounding her, she felt strangely calm. Knowing that her secret was out brought both relief and anxiety. It meant no more hiding, but also no more anonymity. As the bus rumbled down the road, she gazed out the window, watching the trees blur past. One thing was certain, Jake Carter had underestimated her, and now he was about to find out exactly who he was dealing with. The fallout from Jake's social media post didn't stop at the school gates. It reached far beyond Maplewood. By the time Maya got home that afternoon, her phone was buzzing nonstop with notifications. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers were reaching out to her, eager to comment on the revelation about her famous father. Some messages were kind and supportive, while others bordered on intrusive, asking questions she wasn't ready to answer. It felt like the entire world had suddenly turned its attention toward her. And for the first time, Maya wished she could disappear. But it wasn't just classmates who noticed the buzz. One of Maya's teachers, Mrs. Alvarez, saw the viral post during her lunch break and immediately recognized the last name Diesel. She remembered seeing an interview months ago where Vin Diesel spoke fondly about his adopted daughter and his efforts to give her a normal upbringing. Concerned about how the situation might affect Maya, Mrs. Alvarez decided to take action. That evening, she sent a private email to Vin Diesel's public relations team, explaining what had happened and expressing her worries about Maya being targeted by bullying. Vin received the message late that night while reviewing scripts in his Los Angeles home. At first glance, the subject line, concerning Maya Johnson, caught him off guard. As he read through the details, his expression shifted from curiosity to concern. He knew moving to a new town would be challenging for Maya, but he hadn't anticipated anything like this. After forwarding the email to his wife, he picked up his phone and called Lincoln High School's principal directly. The next morning, Principal Harris arrived at work to find a voicemail waiting for him. When he listened to the deep, unmistakable voice on the other end, he nearly dropped his coffee mug. "Mr. Harris, this is Vin Diesel," the message began. "I'm reaching out regarding my daughter, Maya. I understand there has been some difficulty involving another student. While I prefer to keep our family life private, I wanted to ensure you're aware of the situation and that steps are taken to protect her well-being." Principal Harris scrambled to return the call, stunned not only by the celebrity connection but also by Vin's calm yet firm demeanor. During their conversation, Vin avoided using his fame as leverage. Instead, he emphasized the importance of creating a safe environment for all students. He asked that appropriate measures be taken against Jake without singling him out publicly, ensuring the focus remained on resolving the issue rather than escalating it further. Later that day, Principal Harris called Jake and his parents into his office for an emergency meeting. Sitting across from them, he explained the gravity of the situation, not just because of the bullying itself, but because it had spiraled into something much larger due to Jake's careless actions. Jake's parents, visibly embarrassed, promised to address the matter seriously. They agreed to ground Jake indefinitely, revoke his gaming privileges, and require him to attend counseling sessions focused on empathy and accountability. Meanwhile, Vin made plans to visit Maplewood discreetly under the guise of a business trip. He arrived 2 days later, quietly meeting with Principal Harris and checking in personally with Maya's teachers. Though he kept a low profile, word quickly spread among staff members that Vin Diesel was in town. Some teachers joked nervously about asking for autographs, but everyone respected his decision to stay out of the spotlight. When Maya came home from school that Friday, she found her dad sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone with a thoughtful expression. For a moment she froze, unsure whether to feel relieved or annoyed that he'd stepped in, but when she saw the warmth in his eyes, any frustration melted away. "Hey, kiddo," Vin said softly, standing up to pull her into a hug. "How are you holding up?" Maya hesitated before answering honestly. "It's been overwhelming. Everyone knows now, and I don't know if things will ever go back to normal." Vin nodded, understanding exactly how she felt. "I know it's hard," he said gently. "But remember, standing up for yourself isn't about hiding who you are. It's about showing people they can't define you. You handled everything with so much grace, Maya. I'm proud of you." As they sat together talking, Maya realized her dad wasn't there to fix everything for her. He was there to support her. And for the first time since the drama began, she allowed herself to feel hopeful. With her family behind her and Jake finally facing consequences for his actions, maybe there was a chance to move forward after all. The days following Vin Diesel's visit to Maplewood marked a turning point. Not just for Maya and Jake, but for the entire school. Word of Vin's quiet intervention spread among teachers and staff, though no one dared mention it openly to students. Still, the atmosphere at Lincoln High began to shift. Anti-bullying posters appeared on bulletin boards, assemblies were held to discuss kindness and respect, and counselors made themselves more available to anyone struggling. For once, the school felt like it was taking real steps toward change. Jake, however, wasn't faring well. Grounded indefinitely and banned from attending Friday night football games or hanging out with his friends, he spent most of his time sulking in his room. His parents had taken away his phone and gaming console, leaving him with little else to do but think about what he'd done. At first, he tried convincing himself that he didn't care, that people would eventually forget about the whole ordeal. But deep down, guilt gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the image of Maya standing confidently in front of their classmates, calling him out for his behavior. Worse still, he couldn't ignore the way some of his own friends now avoided him, whispering behind his back about how messed up things had gotten. One afternoon, as Jake sat alone during detention, Mrs. Alvarez approached him. She had been observing his behavior closely since the incident and decided it was time to intervene. Pulling up a chair beside him, she handed him a flyer advertising volunteer opportunities at the local community center. "You've got a lot of energy, Jake," she said matter-of-factly. "Why not put it toward something positive?" Jake scowled, crumpling the flyer in his hand. "What's the point? Everyone already thinks I'm a jerk." Mrs. Alvarez raised an eyebrow, her tone firm but kind. "Do you want them to keep thinking that? Or do you want to prove them wrong?" Her words lingered long after she left. That night, unable to sleep, Jake found himself staring at the crumpled flyer on his desk. He thought about all the times he'd mocked others for being different, all the laughs he'd earned at someone else's expense. For the first time, he realized how empty those victories felt now. Maybe Mrs. Alvarez was right. Maybe he could turn things around. The next morning, he signed up to help coach a youth basketball team at the community center. At school, Maya noticed subtle changes in Jake's behavior. He stopped glaring at her in the hallways and even nodded politely when their paths crossed. One day, during study hall, he approached her table hesitantly, clutching a folded piece of paper in his hands. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya looked up surprised. Part of her wanted to dismiss him outright, to remind him of everything he'd put her through. But another part of her saw the vulnerability in his eyes and decided to hear him out. Nodding slightly, she gestured for him to sit down. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," Jake began, fidgeting nervously. "For everything. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. Or how stupid I was being. And I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I really mean it." Maya studied him carefully, searching for any trace of insincerity. When she found none, she sighed softly. "It's not going to be easy to trust you again, Jake. You made my life really hard for no reason." "I know," he admitted, looking down at his hands. "And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I'm trying to change, I swear. I started volunteering at the community center, and I guess I'm learning what it means to actually make a difference instead of tearing people down." Maya hesitated before responding. She didn't owe Jake forgiveness, and she knew that. But she also recognized the courage it must have taken for him to apologize, especially given how proud he usually was. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll give you credit for trying. But actions speak louder than words, Jake. Show me and everyone else that you're serious about changing." Relieved but still cautious, Jake nodded. "I will. Thanks, Maya." Over the next few weeks, Jake worked tirelessly to rebuild his reputation. He mentored younger kids at the community center, organized a fundraiser for anti-bullying programs, and even joined the school's peer mediation group. While some students remained skeptical, others began to see glimpses of the person Jake could become if he stayed on this path. As for Maya, she continued navigating life at Lincoln High with resilience and grace. Though she never fully forgave Jake overnight, she acknowledged his efforts, recognizing that true growth often starts with accountability. Slowly but surely, both of them began finding their place, not as enemies but as two individuals learning to rise above their past mistakes. Months passed, and the once tense atmosphere at Lincoln High began to transform. What had started as a storm of drama and conflict slowly gave way to something quieter but more meaningful, a sense of understanding and growth. For Maya, life became easier in ways she hadn't expected. The initial frenzy over her connection to Vin Diesel faded, as people realized she wasn't interested in using her fame for attention. Instead, they saw her for who she truly was. A smart, kind, and determined young woman who refused to let anyone dull her shine. Maya found her stride in unexpected places. She joined the school's debate team, where her quick wit and eloquence earned her admiration from teammates and opponents alike. During one competition, she delivered a passionate speech about inclusivity and standing up against bullying, drawing nods of approval from judges and audience members. It was clear that Maya wasn't just speaking from theory, she was sharing lessons she'd lived through, Her words resonated deeply, inspiring others to think critically about their own actions. Meanwhile, Jake continued working to repair his reputation. Though he knew he couldn't erase the past, he committed himself fully to becoming someone better. Coaching basketball at the community center became his favorite part of the week. Watching kids light up when they made a basket or worked together as a team reminded him of the joy that came from lifting others up instead of tearing them down. Some of his former friends teased him for going soft, but Jake no longer cared what they thought. He was building something real, something that mattered. At school, Jake's efforts didn't go unnoticed. Teachers praised his involvement in peer mediation sessions, where he helped resolve conflicts between students. Even Principal Harris acknowledged the change during an assembly, encouraging everyone to take inspiration from Jake's journey. "Mistakes don't define us," he said firmly. "What defines us is how we choose to grow from them." Though Maya and Jake weren't close by any means, there was a mutual respect between them now. They occasionally exchanged polite smiles in the hallway, or brief words during group projects. One day, after a particularly heated debate practice, Jake approached Maya with a small grin. "You're really good at this," he admitted, nodding toward the podium. "Like scary good." Maya raised an eyebrow, fighting back a smirk. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Jake shrugged, chuckling nervously. "Yeah, I guess so. Just keep doing what you're doing, okay? You're making a difference." For a moment, Maya simply looked at him, seeing not the bully he'd been but the person he was trying to become. "Thanks," she said finally, offering him a small smile before walking away. By spring, Maya had carved out a place for herself at Lincoln High. She led workshops on anti-bullying initiatives, organized fundraisers for local charities, and even started a blog where she shared stories about embracing individuality. Her confidence inspired others to speak up and embrace their own uniqueness. Students who had once whispered about her now sought her advice or simply enjoyed her company. Maya had become a quiet leader, not because of her last name, but because of the strength she carried within herself. As the school year drew to a close, Maya reflected on everything she'd been through. Sitting on the front steps of Lincoln High one sunny afternoon, she watched classmates laugh and joke around, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known before. Life here hadn't been easy, but it had taught her invaluable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and self-worth. Back at home, Vin observed his daughter with pride. He had always known Maya was strong, but seeing her navigate challenges with such grace left him awestruck. Over dinner one night, he leaned back in his chair and smiled warmly. "You know, Maya," he said, his deep voice filled with affection, "I couldn't be prouder of the person you've become. You've handled everything with so much courage." Maya blushed slightly, stirring her pasta. "It hasn't been perfect," she admitted. "But I've learned a lot, about other people and about myself." Vin nodded thoughtfully. "That's all anyone can ask for. Growth isn't about being flawless. It's about learning and moving forward. And you've done exactly that." The sun set over Maplewood, casting golden hues across the quiet streets. Maya felt grateful for her family, for her friends, and for the journey that had shaped her into the person she was today. Though she knew challenges would always come her way, she faced the future with unwavering determination. After all, she had already proven to herself, and to everyone else, that no bully, no obstacle, and no amount of fear could dim her light.